Hi, welcome to the presentation of my Capstone project. My name is Tiffany Baczek, and I am a student at Georgetown College. The research question that I decided to focus my project on is in what ways and to what extent does a one-time professional development on the use of visual aids for culturally and linguistically diverse students have on the middle level staff at my school? I decided to research this question because I felt like it was the most relevant question that I could do in the particular school that I work in. We have a very diverse population of students, but we have a very few number of actual ESL students in the ESL program. So we have only 6 students at the middle level who obtain ESL services. So I thought that with being an art teacher and using visual aids all the time, that I could really bring my expertise about using visual aids um, just to the attention of the other teachers in my school, and that they would maybe find that valuable as a way to know why they're important and why they work. And so I started my research on how visual aids are used and how they're important for ESL students. I researched many peer-reviewed articles, and through that research, I had 3 very clear themes emerge. Visual aids are effective, technology and the use of visual aids go hand in hand, and in order for visual aids to be effective, they must be explicitly taught. In the theme of visual aids are effective, I found many sources that talked about the different types of visual aids that were effective, charts, anchor charts, maps, tables, and things that are already in textbooks, things that teachers make, things that they find online. There are lots of different visual aids that are effective. And it also really connected with how ESL students learn. So it is really effective for them to be able to see pictures and then be able to attach meaning to those images. I think that's true for ESL students and lots of students who are even just visual learners. In the theme of technology and visual aids, again, there was a lot of research about different tools, specifically technology tools that were really engaging to students, and I think that was another one of the key parts to the technology theme was that technology really motivates students and it helps engage students. And one of the more powerful ways that I saw um, represented in this specific theme of using technology as visual aids is being able to hand that power over to the students and for them to be able to use technology as a tool to show their learning, not just to take the information from a visual aid, but for them to be able to use visual aids to show that they've met a standard. I think this was also a really interesting theme specifically because I think when it comes to using visual aids that teachers tend to lean towards using technology as visual aids because it's efficient and it's effective. The third theme of explicitly teaching visual aids as a must was probably the most eye-opening theme for me. Um, it really focused on how if a teacher does not explicitly teach how to use a visual aid, then students really don't give it much value. So it really gave lots of examples of how teachers have to guide students how to use these visual aids because students often give value to only text because that's often how they are assessed. So if they're only being assessed with text, then they don't necessarily give value to pictures or other things that they may be seeing. So to be able to explicitly point out visuals in textbooks or anchor charts on your walls or word walls, those things are really important because once a teacher actually points them out and shows shows a student how to use them, then they will give them value and it will help them be able to realize that the information that is in those visual aids is important. I use the explanatory mixed methods design to gather the data for my research. The qualitative data that I collected was 2 surveys that I gave. I gave one survey before the PD, the professional development session, and it was on a Likert scale from 1 to 5. And then I gave another Likert scale survey after the professional development with the same scale of 1 through 5. And the second set of data that I gathered, the qualitative data, was 2 weeks later. I sent out a set of interview questions through a Google form. And I also used Google Forms when I sent out both of these pre and post surveys as well. I think that gathering data this way was the best way to do it because I was able to easily get an idea of where they stood as far as how they valued visual aids and how often they used them in the surveys. And then 2 weeks later, being able to kind of get their voice in more an authentic way of how that they perceived using visual aids and how that they've used them since the professional development session was able to give me a more um, kind of a deeper analysis of how they felt and what they've done since the professional development session around using visual aids. I did collect all of my data through Google Forms, so both of the surveys, like I said, were through Google Forms, and as well the interview that was sent out 2 weeks later was through a Google form. So all of the information was unanimous, and it will all be destroyed as soon as this project is over. So I collected my data, like I mentioned before, using Google Forms, and the first survey had 10 questions on it with a Likert scale, one being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. And the post survey was the same scale, and the interview questions that were sent out later were also in a Google form. I had 4 open-ended questions and 3 multiple choice questions on that survey. I ended up having a total of 10 teachers participate in the professional development. So I had 10 responses to the pre and post survey. Um, it was kind of a disappointing number. I wished it had been more just to give the numbers more value. But knowing how busy teachers are, I was happy to have at least 10 people participate. When I sent out the interview questions 2 weeks later, and unfortunately, I only had 4 people respond with those questions, so I'm not sure that those hold as much weight, although I was able to see some themes emerge even from those 4 responses. So in table 2, I just wrote down all of the questions that were on the survey, and I got the average from the 10 answers that I received from all of the participants. So 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. I felt that I was definitely able to um, gauge their attitudes towards using visual aids in the classroom based upon the averages of their answers. In figure 1.1, I collected the 4 questions that I thought were good examples of how the participants felt as far as their attitudes about PD and the use of visual aids. So you can see that they kind of hover 3 of the 4 questions right around the 3 line. Second question, I value the effectiveness of visual aids in the classroom for ESL students, was a 4.5. So I think that teachers definitely value the use of visual aids. But I think with the other questions, they were kind of maybe something that they haven't really reflected on very much was their practice of using visual aids. So they really weren't sure, the kind of 3 in the middle, about if they needed more professional development around how to use them. Um, a little over 3.5, 3.6 average on that they use visual aids every day. Um, and around a 3 for whether or not they felt like they explicitly taught students how to use visual aids and graphs. So I think that's a really good indication of that they probably haven't really reflected on this practice very much. In figure 2.1, I gathered the 4 questions that I thought were good examples of types of visual aids that use in the classroom. The survey questions show that most teachers strongly agree that they do not have enough time to create their own visual aids, and that they do usually use the textbook visual aids, or technology as a resource for visual aids. Table 3 represents the post-survey questions and the averages for those. I used the Likert scale again, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 strongly agree, and I found the averages of the 10 participants' answers. Most teachers found that they had some new tools that they could use in the classroom. They felt more confident using visual aids in the classroom, and most teachers felt like they did not think that more PD was necessary. Overall, I would say that the study definitely revealed that teachers value the use of visual aids in the classroom. And overall, I feel that the study revealed that teachers really do value the use of visual aids in the classroom with ESL students. It's a great way to scaffold instruction, and I think they feel probably more confident creating their own visual aids based upon some of the examples that I showed them in their professional development. I think they feel that being able to use visual aids as a way for students to show their learning is also a really powerful tool. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for them and for me as well was just the notion that they have to be explicitly taught in order for them to be valuable. I think that's probably something we all know, but probably often just forget. So just to kind of put that in the forefront of their mind, to know that if you're going to include a visual aid in your lesson, that is really important to be able to teach students explicitly how to use that so that they can extract that information. Otherwise, they just see it as a graphic and something that doesn't necessarily contain information. Most teachers also feel that even though they find a lot of value in it, that they don't necessarily see a need for more professional development. And for this case in my school, I think that's not because they don't value it, just because they feel that they don't need any more just because we don't have a lot of ESL students. I think the results of my study with the link to my literature review were quite streamlined. I was able to see the results and the themes from my literature review match up quite easily. So, as far as visual aids being effective in the pre and post survey, the majority of the teachers did agree that visual aids were an effective scaffolding tool to use with ESL students. With the theme of technology and visual aids, technology was referenced many times in the follow-up questions that I did with the teachers in the interview 2 weeks later. They mentioned that they did mostly use visual aids that were digital because they were engaging, they motivate students, and that students, it was just an easily accessible tool for them. And around explicitly teaching the use of visual aids in the pre and post survey, majority of the participants fell around the 3 mark, which is kind of right there in the middle. And like I said prior to this, I think it was because they maybe have just not reflected on this practice, and maybe they explicitly teach it and maybe they don't. They hadn't really thought about it very much. So some implications for future practices at my school are that I don't really think that there's more PD that's going to be necessary. I think that it shows that the one-time professional development was useful for the teachers that did come. Um, but seeing as all the other things that we have going on with our school right now, we're implementing new social and emotional learning curriculum. We have new schedules, and we just have a lot of new things happening. So on top of all that, I don't feel that any more PD around using visual aids with ESL students is necessary. I do think that given what I found and kind of the feedback from the teachers about explicitly teaching those students how to use those visual aids, it would be maybe a great reminder for me to um, talk to the ESL teachers specifically, and when they're going into classrooms, that they can be explicitly teaching those visual aids, making sure they're reaching out to those ESL students and that they're very clear on how to use those visual aids and gather information from them, as well as reminding the other teachers how important that is. So overall, I think that the research shows that visual aids are a powerful tool and facilitate learning for ELL students, and that teachers found the PD valuable but prefer not to have further training on the matter. Thank you guys for listening, and I appreciate all of your feedback.